Good morning. Um, I'm getting on here. It's May the 14th, uh, 2017. Um, and I'm actually late doing this. I thought um, Mental Health Awareness Week was this week, and it's actually next week. Today is Mother's Day of 2017. Um, and I thought Mental Health Awareness Week was the following week. So I'm catching Mental Health Awareness Week on the last day um, today, and I'm doing this video talking about my personal experience with my disease and what those are, and what kind of caused it, and what happened, how it developed. Um, so it's gonna be somewhat of I'm gonna try and compress it as much as possible, not get into too much of the gory details, as it were. But I do want to express that things like this happen to everyday people. Um, I think my initial struggle with it started when I was really young. Um, Before I was a teenager, I grew up in a household with my grandmother and grandfather. And my grandfather, little backstory on him, he grew up in Brooklyn in the 1930s, and he was born in 1930, right at the beginning of the Great Depression. Um, so those were hard times, which developed him into somewhat of a hard individual. Um, no nonsense, very conservative, and it was a rough spot for a kid that grew up loving music. My first, I think when I first fell in love with music was listening to Aretha Franklin and the Temptations, and Elvis, and Chuck Berry, and all these oldies my grandmother would listen to in the kitchen, whenever she was making food, doing anything. When she was sewing, she would always have our local oldies station on, listening to music, and that's when I first kind of fell in love with the idea of music. Um, and nobody really understood where it came from, because my family wasn't really a an artistic family, and we didn't really, my grandfather was a an engineer. He's a structural engineer, mechanical, structural, and I think he forayed in excuse me, dabbled in electrical engineering as well. So very, you know, um, stern, strict kind of environment, not a very artistically flourishing art environment. Fast forward to my teenage years, especially early on, about 13, 14. Um, I had already been playing guitar for quite a while at this point. I had moved from piano to guitar, been playing for a couple of years. Um, and, I received backlash from it. You know, oh, you're not gonna, there's no way you can ever make any money working in music. I live in Nashville, Music City. There are plenty of jobs. I know now as an adult, to work as a musician, not only a musician, but producer, recording, you name it. You can get a job doing it. You can make money doing it. It's just all about the hustle with anything, like with anything. Um, and I was always encouraged by two members of my family, my grandmother and my aunt Susan. My aunt Susan always had good music around. She was a big, jazz head. So like, oh God, they're escaping me at the moment. Um, Billie Holiday, Nat King Cole, Van Morrison. Even though some would argue that's rock and roll, he was a very jazz influenced rock and roller, if anything. So that a lot of inspiration came from those two. Um, and they kind of kept the fire going inside me to pursue this and get good at it. Not only you know believe that I could make money doing this, but know that I could. Go forth and trying to do it. And at that point, I was playing gigs. I had started playing with a guy named Nick Nixon, and I was playing blues gigs and doing some of my own gigs as well, going to blues jams and stuff, making a name for myself as a player. Again, fast forward a couple of years, um, my late teens, early 20s, both of those family members contracted a form of cancer. And again, they were not only the two people who inspired me, but they kept my grandfather's negativity towards me and towards my passions at bay. They kind of subdued anything that he ever said towards me in a negative sense, and went to bat for me whenever he came at me in a sometimes what some would consider a violent manner. Um, so, that's kind of my saving, my guardian angels, as it were my grandmother and my aunt. Um, they would always go to bat for me. They would always, Bob, leave off of him. He's a kid. He's passionate about something. At least he's passionate about something. He's not, out doing stupid shit like other kids his age. You know, again, these are in my early 20s, and, I'm out playing gigs. My band's making somewhat of a name for itself at this point. I'm enjoying life as a musician in Music City. Um, and in 2010, I had lost them both. No, 2000 by 2011 they were both gone. Um, and that hit me hard. Um, I was finally introduced to a rougher side of life, drug addiction, alcoholism. In 2011, I was 21. I had already been drinking for about 2 years at this point. Um, and everything kind of was brought to a boil at that point, and I, for a couple of years, was just like that. Um, Fast forward again. After that, um, I sought some help with the strength of a few friends. I was able to get through it. I never had to go through any kind of therapy for my alcoholism or drug addiction. I kind of quit cold turkey. even quit smoking cigarettes and stuff. So, you know, there's all that. And, I met my future wife. And then I had some rough issues with her family, mainly her father. He and I struggled to get along, um, and his daughter being at the center of us trying. Um, I didn't really much care to be his friend, but for the sake of the relationship, I adapted and made the best of it. Then after my daughter was born, they started adding restrictions to me and um, demands, and really not so much demands as similar things that I had to deal with, like with my grandfather, that working in music was unrealistic to support a family, and so on and so forth. And that brings me to where I am now. Now, in the past year, I've spent two separate incidences. I've spent a week's worth of time in two separate mental facilities. I'm currently, taking medicines at an SSTI, which is a serotonin leveling drug that keeps your serotonin levels, the thing that's in your brain that kind of keeps you sane. Um, make sure that they're at a reasonable level, not too high, not too low. Too low, you get depressed. Too high, you get manic and crazy. Um, and unfortunately, I had an imbalance of those due to my long-standing um, mental issues, and that's I say that with reluctance, but it's really nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to sit there and be afraid of for people to know. It's nothing for you to, as a grown individual, fear. Yeah, depression and anxiety, um, suicidal tendencies, these are scary things when you're going through them. But if you're strong enough to make it through, there is always more life to live, and there is always better days to um, to have. Um, Not to get too cheesy, but to quote Johnny Depp, you're having a bad day. It is not a bad life. And that's the simplest way that you can put it. And if you get down on yourself because you're in your 20s and your career's not where you want it to be, remember that some of the most successful people in their 20s were down and out. Some of the most successful people in their 30s were down and out. You look at guys like Tom Hardy, he was addicted to drugs. He was living on the streets at in his 20s. They told him he was worthless, that he would never amount to anything. And now he's an amazing actor. He's won countless awards for it. He's successful. You look at a guy like Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford, until he was in his 30s, it's almost in his 40s, he was struggling just to make ends meet. He was working as a stagehand for the good majority of those years. And he didn't get a break until his late 30s. To Oprah Winfrey, like that's a colossal success story. In her 20s, she was down and out. Even before that, she suffered from abuse from her parents. She was so poor that she had to wear like potato sacks as a dress. Like it's you hear about these amazing people that like struggled, and like you look at them now and they're super successful and they have all this money and they have all of these means to get things done and have their lives be supported. But you don't see them for the struggle that they had to go through to be that person. And it's like I said, mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of. Your mental health is slipping. Get help. That's all I can say. There's nothing wrong with saying that you need help. There's nothing wrong with it. I know it's hard. It really is. Because sometimes you don't want to admit that there's anything wrong. So, to close this out, if you're struggling, know that there's always somebody there that you can talk to. Call the suicide hotline. They won't do anything other than talk to you. They'll help you talk through whatever you're going through that's making you feel like you need to end your life. Call your local, we have one here in Nashville. It's 862-8600, 615-862-8600. It's the local sheriff's office, and you can call them and you can talk to them. They will literally send somebody out to talk to you. You won't go to jail. They won't force you to go to any kind of mental facility. They'll just talk to you. They'll try to find out what's going on, and they'll help you. There's always somebody that you can talk to. If you feel that you have no one else, there's always someone else. Like I said, I'm Harrison Fox. This has been a great discussion. Doodles.